So hello everyone, Charles Banfield here again from Karate Canucks, back with another in our series of conversations with prominent Canadian martial artists. And today I'm pleased to be joined by Sensei Wayne Donivan. So Sensei Donivan began his practice in Shorinji-ryu Kenkokan Karatedo at the Seidokwan Academy of Karatedo and Judo in 1967. And in doing so, he became one of the first students of Hanshi Masayuki Hisataka in the process. By 1969, he became the first Canadian to receive the Shodan rank, or first degree black belt rank, in Shorinji-ryu Kenkokan Karate. Also, as a competitor, Sensei Donivan was North American Shorinji-ryu Kenkokan champion for 4 consecutive years between 1971 and 1974. And this included becoming the Triple Crown champion in 1972 by earning first place finishes in kata, kumite, and shiai. In 1976, Sensei Donivan, as a 4th degree black belt and licensed instructor, was appointed to the role of chief instructor for Kenkokan in North America. Fast forward to 1994, Sensei Donivan decided to leave Kenkokan, the Kenkokan organization, and founded Shorinji-ryu Kentokukan Karatedo, which is an ever-evolving style of karate, which incorporates elements of various fighting arts, including boxing, wrestling, aikido, kendo, kenjitsu, iaido, and Japanese ju-jutsu. And today his organization has affiliate dojos across Canada, the United States, and in Japan. So welcome, Sensei Donivan. It's a pleasure to speak with you today, finally.
Yes.
And so welcome. And with that said, usually how these things go is I start with just some basic background questions, such as, where are you from, where did you grow up, and what prompted you to start your martial arts journey?
Well, I was born in Shackleville, Ontario, and lived there for 10 years until my father was transferred to Montreal in 1960. The CPR had transferred him. I come from a long line of railroaders from my great-grandfather to me. And I arrived in Montreal in 1960 and have been living in the Montreal area ever since. And
you're still based in Montreal or outside?
Yes. Oh, yes. Our headquarters actually Dawson College in Montreal.
Okay.
So everything is run. That's considered the headquarters. That's the Hambu for our group.
Okay, great. So I'm curious, and I try to ask this question of everybody. What was it that sort of called you to martial arts? Like in 67, you would have been approximately like 16, 17.
I was 18.
You were 18. There you go. So, what was it that encouraged you to, check out the dojo that became your first, I guess, home for the martial arts or for karate?
Very interesting. I found it interesting looking back over the years, where I could see it was kind of karma. First thing is, I come from a working class, blue collar Irish group. So combat was a regular thing, pretty much in my milieu growing up. So you either did one or two things. You either fought or you ran away. And I started getting tired of running away. I first started, my first class actually was boxing. I studied boxing when I was 8 years old. My father decided it would be best that I go and take some lessons. So I did have some boxing lessons, and I found out what it was like to be punched pretty hard in the nose. So I learned a lot from that. And then I moved from that. I had let's say many encounters over the years. And then I thought, well, it was all hand technique. And in the street, we used to call it giving the boots. And I saw a fair amount of that, received a few. I thought there's got to be a better way. And then when I did get to Montreal, I started to hear about martial arts, Asian martial arts, karate. And I said, okay, maybe, that would be a good idea. Have that in my repertoire if I needed it. And the second was I was very active in high school sports, primarily basketball and football. And then when I graduated in the May of '67, I was without sports, without any activity that I could really do. When I did walk into Seidokwan that day, November 7th, I walked in and met with Sensei Hisataka, and very impressive. I was very impressed because he said to me, and I've never heard him say it to anybody else. He said, I was there with a friend of mine, a high school friend, and the two of us, and we're both 6 feet, and he's not 6 feet tall. And he looked at me and he said, I could teach you many ways to kill somebody. And I thought, okay. And he said, but that's not the point of the study. So that really struck me. So I said, okay, there must be something more to this. And then we signed up right on the spot. And I haven't stopped from that time till this morning. I've been practicing every day. So that's sort of how I got involved in deciding to take it. And then once I was involved in the studies, it just grew and grew and grew. There was so much to it that I thought this is for me. This is for me. It was I have to say very harsh training. It was like a boot camp. Sensei Hisataka was 7 years of age at the time, in his prime. And he had retired from competition, but he still had that drive, and very strict, very demanding, almost like nitroglycerin, could be short fuse. And if things weren't going the way if they were supposed to, then not only did we hear about it, but there was multitudes of push-ups, rolled out. That was part of it. And I had dojo mates that loved it, and just that all you got, and harder is better. So that was my first introduction, and really truly grasped me immediately, caught me immediately.
Yeah. So were you aware of Hanshi Hisataka to seek him out, or did you just kind of find him by chance? Because it sounds like he was
what had happened was, again, yes, he was sent by the Japanese government, Montreal, for the World's Fair. He had in there, he was demonstrating karate and judo on behalf of the Japanese. And he decided to stay and remain in Montreal. So he started, first of all, teaching at McGill University. And as another high school friend of mine had just started at McGill. And he came and told us, there's this guy, there's this Japanese karate guy, just incredible. You just got to go, and now we weren't McGill students, so we couldn't go to McGill. But he said, no, he's opening a dojo in Ville-Saint-Laurent, which is a suburb of downtown Montreal, and it's probably, I used to run there. It's about a mile from my house at that time in Ville-Saint-Laurent. So I used to, run back and forth. So it was close by, and we said, we'll check it out. and it changed my life. You know, it really changed my life. So I'm very grateful.
So it was serendipity. It was a happy accident, I guess, that you landed on in his dojo.
Well, karma. You know, it's fate. You know, as I said, I've lived long enough that I can look back now and see a line. And from my first altercation at 5 years of age, the first time I got beat up, to now, I can look back and see the touch stones all the way through, and connecting the dots. And there were times I wanted to go to the right, and I ended up going to the left, and it was the correct or to make. So,
when I was you know, introducing you, and we were talking about the different elements that are in your Kentokukan style, talking about, you know, incorporating boxing and so on. You'd mentioned that you'd done some boxing training. So where does the wrestling, aikido, kendo, kenjitsu, you know, the sword play and the ju-jutsu all sort of come into things? Were you training in those as well as karate, or were they elements of what?
well, in Kenkokan, some people look at it and say it's jiu-jitsu, because we throw, we lock, we choke. So that was already ingrained in there. We also, Kubudo is in there as well. So the basic weapons we studied as sai, bo, and katana. So those are the three weapons. So you have that ingrained in it. I studied kendo for 5 years, and because I enjoyed the sport itself, but our empty hand is one half of it. So empty hand is one way of combat. But what happens if they pick up a stick, or what happens if they come at you? You got to adjust. And I found kendo was very realistic in that sense. Very fast and reflexes, and movement is just incredible. And we, when we used to practice, we used kendo headgear with the kendo goal to study. We didn't compete with the headgear. We used to practice with it. And without gloves, bare knuckle, is really, you know, was a lot of control to the headgear after the second or third punch. So there was a connection there as well. And so that's how I picked that up. As I said before, the jiu-jitsu part of it is ingrained in what we do. Sometimes when we would give demonstrations, people would come up and say, "Oh, that's, you know, you do a wonderful jiu-jitsu, you know, form." And I have to say, yes, well, thank you. Yes, but it's really karate do that we're, you know, doing. And then they'd walk away with a puzzled look, but that was part of it as well. So it sort of incorporates quite a lot of things. Aikido was in it as well, because the founder of Kenkokan studied with Mochizuki Sensei in China during the Second World War. They're both working for the railroad at that time. And they're both judo, high-ranking judo people. So they exchanged time. Kaiso, the founder of Kenkokan, taught Mochizuki his punching techniques and his Okinawa-te, and they exchanged judo, and Mochizuki studied aikido as well. So that was brought us through that connection. Kenkokan was founded after the Second World War, 46, 47, after the Second World War, and then it evolved from there. So there's a lot of forms already ingrained in it. Kaiso was also a Okinawa sumo champion when he was in his youth. So he learned a lot of the Okinawan arts because he was born and raised in Okinawa, and he studied in the contemporary people, Mobuni, Miyagi, were his contemporaries. He was a training partner of Sensei Miyagi. He was a youth of 13, and Miyagi was 37 years of age. They trained together. He was very unusual for a Japanese in that he was over 6 feet tall and 220 pounds. So he was really a giant there in Okinawa. And then he went to China. He traveled. He went to China and he studied the northern arts, northern arts, and that he brought that in. When he put his form together, his style together, said he was combining his studies in Shorinji-ryu and Shorinji-ryu Kenpo. He wanted to reflect in his school the Okinawan studies and the Chinese influence that he had and what he brought. So all of that's why it's very eclectic. He incorporates so much, and we just continue to go from there and evolve from there, and I would send students to study with different people, like judo. I could teach them the basics of judo, but I'm not a judo, what I would call a judo sensei. But I know Nakamura sensei, Olympic coach, very well. I met him in '68 when he came to Seidokwan. His first job was at Seidokwan dojo, and he actually coached me in one of my competitions. He coached me, and my sensei was busy with other things, and he pulled me aside and pulled up a chair and whispered some sweet nothings in my ear and said, go and do this and that. And so I send my students I would send them to study with him. So they would go and they would train with him, and then they'd come back and they'd share their knowledge. Other people went to study iaido. I said, I learned a little bit of kenjitsu through the kendo, but it didn't specialize. So I would send them off, and some of them come back with their rankings, their Shodan and in iaido, and I would expect them to then give back to, I'm willing to learn. They would teach me and then teach other students. So that's how it's sort of, we're always open to new information material. Because if you have a warrior spirit, you need to know all of it you possibly can. If you need to engage in combat, I'm talking about self-defense combat, you cannot be one-dimensional. You have to be ready and open and think outside the box sometimes. And I think this prepares people a lot better. So it's not just the study and limiting it to one specialty. Martial arts has been compartmentalized over the years, but everything we needed to know, we learned in the 10th century. It's already been there. We're just relearning it. Every generation is relearning it.
Yeah. So some would say even I had Hanshi Patrick McCarthy on one of my previous conversations, and he would argue that it goes well beyond the 10th century.
Yeah.
well beyond that. Yeah.
Well, gunpowder, 10th century, changed a lot of things. So, yeah. And now look at us. So yes, pretty eclectic, and I hope that answers your question as to what all the different bits and pieces. You take them alone, it sounds like a whole list of bits and pieces. Well, yes, if you tackle them individually, but when you put them all together, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to cover all of those things. But we're generalists in our form.
We're not specialists. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that from my own experience, that seems to be, again, you before we started here, you mentioned that your style is more of like an outlier because its approach is, like you said, more eclectic, and some of the some of the things that you do in competition are even different. Like you were talking about when I was listing off when you won the Triple Crown at the North American Championships, and it was kata, which I think kata is kata, regardless of style, it's forms, and then it was kumite and shiai. And kumite, I think most people have the understanding that kumite is like you would see at the the OKF championships or whichever. It's two people fighting and it's point fighting, right?
Correct.
But kumite is different in your style, and shiai is more like the kumite, but
yes,
it's much more than just the point fighting. So, can you explain what that is a little bit?
Kumite, I guess the best way to explain it is choreographed set of movements. Yeah, you work in partners, and it's like a kata, and it's a choreographed set of movements that could be 50 exchanges in it. One person punches, the other person escapes, they counterattack. It could be combinations back and forth, and locks can be in there, throwing forms can be in there as well. Oftentimes, the kumite ends with a throwing form, a finishing technique, or a jointing technique at the end. And we competed with that. That was a whole block that we competed in. If you and I were partners, we'd partner up, and we'd go up just like we'd match up in a kata. There'd be two pairs that would go up, and either it would be elimination, you give a hand signal, you're the winner that way, or else we go up one at a time like we do in kata, and it'd be a point system. And there was often some confusion when we would visit or go and compete in non-contact forms or other forms, and they would say, kumite, and they're talking kumite, and we're talking shiai, and there was some confusion with back and forth with that. Yeah. And that's why I see we're outliers. I heard earlier one of your guests saying that they got to know each other really well because of the competitive circuit they would be in. So they go and compete, and they get together, and not everybody can win. Most people lose, and you talk about it and you exchange. So you get used to that. And it would be the same with the senseis. They would get together. They'd go out to dinner. They discuss. We didn't have that because our competition system was so different. We wore fiberglass shells for chest protectors. We wore groin protectors, full point blows as hard as you could to the chest protector, and you're allowed to kick to the groin at that time, which reduced a lot of high Jodan kicks because the people of less stature could concentrate on different types of techniques. So that was different. It's very difficult. I competed in Sensei Soroka was very kind to invite us a couple of times in the early 70s. I competed a few times, but it's so different. We have to, we don't want to hurt anybody, so we're not going to throw the punch 100%. Now, I also know that in non-contact, oftentimes there's contact, so I learned that pretty quick as well. But it's a different game. It's a different, the rules are different. The training is different. And I did reasonably well in the last, I kind of learned the game a little bit, reasonably well the last time I participated. I had a very good match with Sensei Soroka's son. Was quite good, and he's a very small stature, and I'm 6'1", and he's not. So it was a very very interesting and enjoyable technical fight. It wasn't smash and bash. It was a very technical fight. I enjoyed the match very much. They reciprocated by coming to one of our tournaments and suited up on the hard shells, and maybe they enjoyed it. I'm not sure, but they didn't come back. We didn't see them after that. So that made it very different. So because we're not going on this, because we're not, mixing with the people, we competed. Our competitions were primarily, in-house, but we traveled to the United States a lot because Sensei Hisataka was at the World's Fair. He was sent to the World's Fair in New York in 63, 64. So he established some dojos in the New York area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area. And instructors were sent from the headquarters in Japan to carry on his work while he was in Canada. We had dojos there, so we had quite a bit of competition. And there, and people would gather there, or they would come up to Montreal and compete there. So that was sort of our circuit. Till 1980, when we switched our equipment, and Sensei Hisataka moved to what we call koshiki, which is hard contact, body, head, plexiglass headgear. And now you could open, it up, and the tournaments were open to all styles, and they just followed those rules. So, and to my knowledge, it's still going on. I haven't participated in their events since the last time it was held in Montreal in 2007. But apparently it's still going strong. So that's the main reason why, I feel that there wasn't that sort of cross-pollination that you might see with other styles. The other thing was really in the beginning very, very different is nearly exclusively all other styles used seiken. They used the horizontal punch that I'm trying to poke it out in the screen here, but it's rather than the standing fist. We use a standing fist. So it right away, if you're going to do a kata and you have a bank of judges judging a kata, and they're looking at, it's supposed to be in their mind.
Yeah, they're expecting this, but they're seeing this. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So that, that's something wrong right there. And plus a lot of our katas were not the same. They're different. And, our Nahanshin is very similar, picky, similar to that. But there's others that are, when they see them, it's like we're from outer space. And well, to be fair, yes, indeed, because, we never, we go there to show them, to educate more than to eat. So a lot of the competitors felt on our side that why go there and compete, because we'd have to learn all of those katas that were on the competition list.
Yeah.
So that's the reason I think that it remained in that that space, and it didn't open as much. Kind of changed in later years because with koshiki kata. So what happened is a lot of the katas, there's a list of katas that you can compete with. And the judging, if it was a basai, for example, there's different versions of basai, but they would be accepted because these people who would be judging would be familiar with these forms, and whether it was a standing fist or horizontal fist, that wasn't a problem or difficult. So it worked out, and it sort of moved to the middle, I would say, quite a bit.
Okay. No, that's interesting. Yeah, it's like I said before we started talking, I had to plead ignorance. I didn't know very much about this style at all. It sounds quite interesting, and it's like a there's a lot of cross training within, and like you said, the generalists as opposed to specialists.
Mm-hmm.
I can see the appeal in that for sure. It's very, very interesting.
It's a gradual process. I mean, it's like anything else. It's white belts don't do Kabuto. They only start at black belt level. They start Kabuto.
Mm-hmm.
They don't start their jiu-jutsu studies until intermediate level. Let's say orange green belt.
Yeah.
They would start it, and then they'd work up. The self-defense techniques where you get your jiu-jitsu would start at brown belt. So by the time they get to the first-degree black belt, you have a platform that they can prepare them for what I call advanced studies. And then, there's a progression through, if you're going to do Kabuto, you don't start with the kata, you're going to do, Kihon, just like anything else. So they spend a lot of time on Kihon. Well, they start with one weapon, and they have a reasonable handle on the Kihon before you introduce the next weapon. Well, then aikido doesn't kick in until much later. Once you get to Shodan and Nidan, they start concentrating on judo, formal judo. Newaza and the whole package. Then aikido starts at fourth dan, because now you want to move away from harder forms to the softer forms. And then by the time you get up, hopefully, if they stick around long enough by the higher ranks, then they can start moving into more of Chinese, softer Chinese forms.
Yeah.
But that's an evolution you've got to go through in order to accumulate the knowledge.
Yeah. So this is actually a good segue into a question that I usually leave until later on in these conversations. But since you brought it up, I'll ask you. So you mentioned, the progression to get by the time you're at a Shodan, you have some proficiency at various things, but other things you don't start until after Shodan and so on. So the question that I try to ask pretty much everybody that comes on here is, what does a Shodan mean to you? So is it, the North American, at least from what I've learned and from my own experience, the North American attitude around what a black belt is that it's almost like it's the pinnacle. Whereas if you go to Japan or elsewhere, in some cases, it's seen as like your first basic level. And I'm curious as to, your own personal philosophy or your own experience through your own style or through the styles that you've trained. What would you characterize a Shodan as?
I'll answer that with what my sensei said to me. When I received my Shodan in 1969, it was the first one in the style in Canada to receive it. And to your point, it seemed like a big deal. Like it didn't really matter that much to me. I was pleased to have it, but that wasn't necessarily my goal. I just wanted to be better, every day and train. But he pulled me aside. He took me out to dinner. He pulled me aside and he said, in Japan, everybody has a Shodan. And I said, okay. Okay. I didn't have to say, what can you say to that, right? So that sort of set the tone. I think Shodan means first step. Step on the journey. And I think it's a great, huge accomplishment. I really do. And it's not just because it's our style. I mean, lots of styles work very, very hard to set the standard So, they're not giving it away. You got to earn it. And, some people, I had my journey, they line up 15 people and you got to take them one at a time, and, you go down the line and etc. So I think it is a really big deal. I think, the public looks at a black belt, and the mystique is there. It's like,
Yeah.
awe. But I think that they have a reason to be, because people work really hard to achieve that, and it's a great achievement. And I will not, lessen it or belittle it. However, it's it just says to me that all your studies have prepared you to go to college or university. Prepares you in that way that you can really, now you have some tools. You can open that door and then begin your journey in this vast amount of knowledge. That's the way I look at it. I don't think I needed to be humbled, but I was humbled with my sensei coming out and saying that. And it's 100% correct. When I went to Japan and studied, people weren't impressed with my rank. And not that I had much to say. They would say, not what rank are you, how long have you been studying? That's the question they would ask me. And that was their gauge on whether, if you were in the game long enough, you must have learned something. So I think that was there.
Yeah. So you said you trained in Japan.
Yes.
Who did you train with over there? Did your Hanshi go with you, or
no? He was already there. He
when he returned to Japan.
Yeah, he was recalled by his father, the founder, in 1974. His father wanted to retire, and he recalled his son Masayuki back to take over at the Hambu Dojo in Tokyo, and I replaced my sensei. But in 77, I went for my first trip. I spent 3 months there, and I lived with the family. I studied with the founder every morning at 10 o'clock in the morning. We had our practice, and then I went on. I studied primarily with my sensei, but he would he'd come out of retirement to teach me. I brought 5 students with me at the time. Well, he taught us all. Well, I had the direct knowledge from the founder, as well as the son. So I had both of them, and I was staying in their household. My sensei could reach over and shake me any time in the night and say, "We're going to, practice," and that was it. There was, as you know, everything's very compact in Tokyo, so you don't get very far apart, and so it was very intense months. And at the end of it, the founder promoted me to 5th degree black belt. So that was very exciting for me. That was like one of the highlights, I guess, of my career, that he would present his diploma. But that was the first time. I've been a number of times. I've gone back probably 5 or 6 times, but that was the longest, probably the longest 3 months of my life, the training there. So it was great, but some very, very long days.
Yeah. So that's actually kind of going to be what my next question was. How would you characterize the difference between the training in North America versus the training that you encountered in Japan? Was it more or less the same, just longer days, or was it different in any significant way?
Well, my sensei was, orchestrating the practices outside of his father's practice, so it was the same intensity and demands. I guess that the days were long. We practiced. We started at I started with 8 o'clock in the morning with making beds and cooking breakfast, and then the dojo was attached to the house, so we went right there at 10 o'clock. So we practiced pretty well all day. We had breaks for lunch. The juniors came in at 3, 4 o'clock. We were expected to be with the juniors so they could see the adult foreigners, visitors. And then we had the first class, first adult class, and then the second adult class. And that finished at 10 o'clock at night. And then I would go and spend time with my sensei, and we would discuss various things in the morning, and then the whole journey would start over. We did get Sunday off occasionally, so I was pretty happy with that. But the two hardest things was the limited space. Dojo was quite small, so put 12 full-size adults in there, you're pretty close. And we arrived there in May, and I'll have to tell you, July, training in July in Tokyo with the humidity and the heat, and no air conditioning. The air conditioning was they opened the sliding doors to the alleyway, and I found that really. I'm not a hot weather person, so I really found that really tough.
Yeah.
Some people would hang. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't let my students do it. They would hang their doggies in the dojo so that they could come back and get them. Well, during the months, they didn't dry. So I wasn't a big fan of putting on a wet, slimy dogi. So that was, I think that part, the hard work, you're used to it. I mean, it comes in a different form, but it was there, and we did quite a bit of sparring when we were there, combat. We did mobile combat, but we also traveled to do non-contact. We would visit different groups in school, and we we'd have some exchanges and go to clinics. We would go to different clinics, and would bring us to different dojos again to open us up a little bit and exchanges. And it was. I didn't find it any harder than what it was in Canada as far as the training. When the leader of the practice is the same leader, it doesn't matter where you go, it's going to be the same tempo. So
yeah. Where I was going, I guess, with that question is because I've had other people talking about their experiences when they would go to Japan I guess Japan primarily, and one in particular said that it was more of a philosophical, more of a technical experience there, whereas in Canada it was more punches and kicks and push-ups and sweat and what have you. So but again, it would make sense that if it's the same instructor, it's going to be the same workout regardless of the surroundings, right? So
yeah. Well, I would have to say technically, you mentioned technically, we spent time with the founder.
Mm-hmm.
So who better to tell you what to do and how to do it. He focused a lot on basic instruction, which was very, very helpful, because when I was teaching, I could use this material and these tips that he would give us on how to execute technique. And I found that very, very helpful. And his explanation was a very clear, it made sense to me. Although he didn't speak English, I didn't speak Japanese. So it was a little bit difficult, and my sensei wasn't always around to translate for us on our behalf. But that part of it was quite technical. And then he also taught us bow technique. His specialty well as his son was Bo and Sai. You put, and he was, he's an elderly man at that time. He was in his early 70s, but he was still, 6 tall, so he might have shrunk a little bit, but he was still a big man. And you put another 7 of us in there with bows in a small space, and I'm telling you, you were moving, because he didn't particularly care if somebody got, knocked on the ankle or on the head. So, but it was that part, I would say it was very technical. It wasn't just, how many push-ups you can do and how many times you can hit the Makiwara, although we had that.
Yeah.
We did actually do a lot of kumite. Going back to kumite, we did lots of kumite because we could share with our other Japanese students. It's a great way to exchange because we're exchanging techniques, but we're not hurting each other. We need to work together in order to cooperate, in order to get the job done. So it's an excellent way to exchange with people. And they didn't speak English. We didn't speak Japanese, but we spoke the language of Karatedo and the kumite. So that part worked out really well.
Yeah. So when you started back in '67, and you were talking about how the training was pretty tough, and that was over 50 years ago,
Right.
and I'm curious as to how your approach to training and teaching has evolved over time, because I would guess that you would have picked up on the cues from your sensei as to how to run a class and how to teach and how to how to drill your students in different techniques and forms and so on. Has that changed or evolved much over time, or are you still going about it more or less the same way as you did back in the '60s and early '70s?
Well, I think you have to evolve. You have to evolve. I mean, I'm not 18 anymore, so I'd like to think my body is hanging on, but it's not what it was. So yes, it has evolved. It's evolved quite a bit. When we first started training, there was no do. There was no karate. It was karate jutsu. It was combat. It was self-defense, boot camp, combat. That's what it's all about. Everything in our dojo ended up getting broken. Windows broken, blackboards cracked, mirrors broken, boot rack smashed, walls hammered. It was siding. So what happened is the white belts would have to come out. We had hammers. So after they hit the siding, the nails would come out of the siding. We'd only know that because it'd be people with little red dots on the back of their gis, and the white belts would go and hammer the nails back in with the siding back up. So there was that, that attitude, of a chip on the shoulder attitude, fiercely competitive in the dojo. Outside the dojo was okay, but inside the dojo, there was no quarter, given. It was, you suit up, you're going to be ready that somebody's going to come. That kind of an attitude. And it did evolve. I was not interested in teaching the least. My job was to compete, win, bring glory to the style. That's my job. So that's what I did. And as you said earlier, kata, kumite, and shiai. My specialty was shiai. But as time went on, I replaced Sensei in '74 when he returned to Japan. As you said earlier, I taught as he taught. Now he's the 7th Dan, and I wasn't. He's much superior technically than I was, but I taught as he taught. But as I moved on, I wanted to be better. I was a teacher, but I wanted to be better as a teacher. And I was running the dojo, and I'm not a great, I wasn't a great businessman, or, well, 7 years I worked on that, and I paid the bills, but, I wasn't taking any vacations, put it that way, which worked out fine with me because all I was really interested in was training and studying and practicing. Then I thought, how am I going to get better? I have to go back to school. I have to go back and further my education. So I applied to McGill in the phys ed department, and before I went to Japan in '77. And I was accepted in the fall of '77, and I studied, and I received my phys ed degree in 1980. By that time, I was already teaching at Dawson College part-time. I was teaching at McGill instructional department, took over from my sensei who'd been there previous, part-time there as well. And I was teaching at Seidokwan and going to school full-time. So I had a lot on my plate as far as teaching. And then I was asked by the professor, one of the professors that taught at McGill was a friend of my sensei. He was a second Dan in Taekwondo, Dr. Dan Marisi, and he was teaching martial arts course. And when I came on board, he said, look, you know more about this than I do, so I'd like you to teach my course. So I started teaching the phys ed department his course. So I had that on my second year. I had that on my plate as well. So I taught that for 2 years. All that to say that experience changed my outlook on teaching. I was using the command style to teach, military command style to teach. I say you do, but I've evolved to what I call guided discovery, where I hopefully point students in the right direction, but I can't make anybody really do anything. So this is my evolution. The other step that happened, which led me to develop Kentokukan, was I wanted to. I think jiu-jutsu is important. I think that one has to be able to defend themselves. Because we never know. We could be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Well, I think you need not only have the skill, but you have to have the confidence to be able, and the thinking process, be able to slow things down enough that you're able to understand what's in front of you and deal with it, whether it's strike or run, whatever it is. I think that's still important. But what had happened in the 1980s with sports, with the Koshiki sports, Kentokukan moved to more sports, and it moved away from the more of the jutsu side, moved into sports. But remember, I said before there was no do. And as I matured, I was thinking, and I had retired from competition. I'm thinking, there's got to be more to this than competition. And I knew there was more. But at the same time, I've seen a lot of fantastic athletes, men and women, leave. They hit their pinnacle, they were champions, and then that's all there was. And they would leave, like professional athletes. They would retire and they'd leave, and I'd say, that to me, that's not martial arts way. So I started to evolve towards do, putting in do, and especially since I was hired full time at Dawson College as a phys ed teacher. Part of the impetus for me to go back to school was the director of athletics at Dawson College came up to me one day and he said, you're doing a great job teaching part-time. If you wanted a full-time job here, all you need is your degree. And if you get your degree, I'll see that you're full-time in the phys ed department. and he was true to his word. So once I went in to teach college, then it's a different world. It's a different atmosphere. They're there for credits. So I started to think, okay, now how do we move this into leadership? How can we? You see, as I say, I don't train soldiers. No, I train people to be generals, not soldiers. Soldiers is part of the program. But that's sort of my attitude, not sort of, it is my attitude, bringing people forward. And as they progress through the ranks, yes, they can do, judo and ju-jutsu and but what kind of a person are they? Are they contributing somehow to the betterment of society? This attitude, and I fall back on my studies of Dr. Kano, Jigoro Kano, founder of Judo.
Judo, yeah.
I am a great, huge admirer of his philosophy. He inspired me to think about going into physical education. His philosophy of physical culture and physical education was enormous in Japan. I took that, and I took Yoshiba Sensei's, founder of Aikido's philosophy, spirituality. I thought, there's something there, and I must admit I don't understand, a quarter of his, spiritual philosophy as he got older in his life, but I get the gist of it. So when you evolve as a martial artist, you're a young man or woman. You move through the physical part. You gotta develop and maintain your body, because old age is not for the weak.
Mm-hmm.
So you better start young and put some money in the bank. So this is the way I feel how that should be. Second, you need to work your intellect. You have to read. You have to study yourself and the world, and that expands from the martial arts. That comes out of the martial arts. I was given an assignment by my sensei one time. He said, I want an essay from you. He said, I want you to study all the major religions in the world, and I want you to give me an essay on that. Well, Sensei says you do. So went and started the process of research. Now, from one thing, learn 10,000 things. It's not just that. That's important. It opens your mind. But that applies to everything. Be curious. Look at things and study things and discover, the why and the how of things. And you evolve to that. Like, there's a lot of people that are in the martial arts now, and I'm so pleased that they're doing the research, they're digging, they're scratching, they're trying to find, where did we come from and where did this, happen? And I think that's fantastic. I think it inspires others to follow the martial arts. Not everybody is a fighter. Some people are more intellectual about it. There's space for everybody in karate. The last part is the spiritual side, and how that works. So perhaps my sensei was trying to guide me in that area by assigning this essay to me. I think you need to, my students, I hope not everybody's, no sense asking an 18-year-old who wants to smash and bash, chop down trees with his face and eat rocks about spirituality. I mean, it's not their time. They're not mature enough. But there needs to come a time, if you're going to stay in the martial arts for 50 years or 60 years, to move on to that. So that's the evolution of the process. And my teaching has evolved from, I say you do, here's my perspective. This is what I have to offer you. I will, if you're interested, I will help you. And if you have a question, I'm here to help you. And expand that beyond, technical things. I call technical people that teach punch and kick, they're instructors. They're drill sergeants. The sensei is totally different. Sensei has to deal with whole entire students. If they had a bad day at school, well, it's going to affect them when they come in the dojo. If they, are hungry, they didn't have something to eat, it's going to affect their training. This, all senseis have been around for a long time. They know this. They see that. You have to care. You have to care about your students, and you're responsible. You're like a parent. You have to be responsible for them. And I think that the evolution of teaching to a point where those are the most important things.
Yeah, I like how you put it, guided discovery as opposed to, command and demand.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it's what am I trying to say here? It's a very mature approach to things, and I think that comes with time. You like you said, you can't expect an 18-year-old who's mostly interested in self-preservation to think about self-perfection, and that's kind of evolution of it. I think as martial artists mature, in their own styles or in their own lives, that's something I think that comes to the forefront. So I like that a lot, actually. Very, very good insights on that. So something I'll be internalizing as well from this conversation. So it's interesting. The more of these discussions I have, I'm finding there's two things that I'm finding. One is the reverence that it doesn't matter how successful you are or how old you become or whatever it is, the reverence that they have for their first teachers, that resonates with me. Possibly because I didn't come to karate until I was almost 40. So I'm a late bloomer when it comes to this. So for me, this is really, really, really interesting to see. But the other thing is something always opens my eyes every time I speak with somebody like yourself or like, Sensei Slokey or Sensei Burkowski or, the others that I've spoken with. So yeah, I this is one that I will attribute to you for sure. The guided discovery approach to teaching, because not everybody gets it, obviously. So,
well, there's a place for command. I'll backtrack a little bit. There's a place for command. If I am observing a student and a building is going to start to come down on their head, I'm not going to ask them to think about it. I'm going to yell at them and I'm going to scream at them, get the hell out of the road or whatever you need to say.
Yep.
So there's a place for that. And if I was preparing, people for, soldiers, I was preparing soldiers. I would consider myself a soldier when I started. That's what we were drilling as. And it has a place. But I have found that it doesn't really work. Command it to the short time it'll work, but after it doesn't work anymore, because what I found is I want the student to take ownership of their own learning. I want them to take the responsibility for their own learning. It's not about me, about them. I'm only here to help them get where they want to be. So I ask them, what do you want? And they say, blah, 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 blah. And I say, well, how hard are you willing to work? And then the next question is, how can I help you? And then that puts the ownership on them, and they, and I want them to master it. So I will guide them, and they all have their limits. I say that martial arts is for a lifetime, but not for everybody. Everybody has a different life, so I have to be very careful about imposing my personal feelings on other people. But I take great pleasure in guided discovery. It's a very interesting journey, because to and fro, because I'm learning as I'm guiding them, but I have to take cues from them. They're the ones that it's their path, it's their journey. And so I find it very interesting on how we go with this, where they go with it. If they decide to move on to other things, so be it. I will say I struggle, perhaps other senseis struggle with the investment they put into a student. And then the student decides then, well, thank you very much, sensei, but I'm going to, take up mountain climbing or scuba diving, or it can be a letdown, it could be. And then, because only the sensei can see a student's full potential. So they're not looking at the person in front of them. They're looking at the person a year from now or 2 years from now, and how they could be and what they could be. Again, much like a parent. And then they stop. But then push it back a little bit, because then, the journey is over. But then I look at myself and say, wait a minute, now it's not my journey, it's their journey. So, maybe that's the way it needs to be.
Yeah.
And then I kind of rationalize it to myself. I would say, well, maybe in the next lifetime. And then go on from there, right? And then the next person walks through the door and is full of potential, and you begin again. So I think that's how it will.
Yeah. So a question I've been asking most of the people I have the pleasure of speaking with through this podcast is about epiphanies, little eureka moments, or large eureka moments that they've kind of discovered or uncovered throughout their years of training. And you've been involved in this for 54 years plus. What would you say was your? Well, I'm sure there have probably been many. I think the whole moving toward guided discovery was probably one of them. But would you say that you've had many prominent or memorable eureka moments over your time in the arts?
Very good question. I would like to. I don't know if it's a eureka. What surprises me? Not anymore, but when it first happened to me, remember I told you about my journey and my destiny? What surprised me is, remember, I never wanted to teach. I was not interested in teaching at all. In 1973, my sensei approached me and he said, look, I'm returning to Japan. I've been recalled. The senior student, I'd like you to take over. I didn't take over because I wanted to teach. I took over because my sensei asked me.
Yeah.
It was my duty to do that. I was already working. I left my job and started teaching. In 1974, that was it. I started teaching, and I grew into it. I grew into it because, as I said earlier, I want to be the best. Whatever I do, I want to be the best. So if I'm going to teach, I want to be the best. Not that I'm comparing to somebody else, including my sensei. I could never be my sensei, but I want to be the best sensei I can possibly be, and I'm still working on it. And I'm looking forward to it. that was I guess if you call it Eureka moment, because I wasn't going in that direction at all, and it ended up, I've been teaching ever since. Well, that was a big deal. Another thing that I would say, not Eureka, but as I call it Zen moment. The Zen moment is like flow. When you're in the zone, you call it flow or in the zone. It happened to me a number of times in shiai. And it happened to me one time in kata. I was presented with my Shodan. It was a big deal because I was the first one, right? It was a big deal. I felt pressure, and I was performing a kata, Nahanshin kata. And I'm pretty nervous about it. When I started, I got through about, I would say, a quarter of the way through. I don't remember a thing. I came off, and I went to my training partner, and I said, "Oh, how did it go?" He said it was perfect. It was like like you always do it. Didn't remember a thing, but I just motor memory or whatever it was got me through. Then in shiai, a number of times in shiai for that's full blow. I just sensed the moment, threw it, boom, done. I don't remember even the technique, what it was. It was over. So that's what I call being in flow, being in that zone, in that moment. It startled me, the first couple of times it startled me. But again, it's the repetition, the practice, everything just comes together at that one, second. And that's what I call, I don't know if it's a Eureka moment, but that Zen moment, you're in that space. It's that time between, the droplet or it hits the sink, that's all that time. It's really quite special. And I can only enjoy it if somebody was kind enough to videotape it. I can only enjoy it after the fact, because in the moment, it's not. I don't know if that satisfies your question to you.
No, it's well, it was however you want to answer the question. So no, I get what you mean though. I do. So when you're talking about shiai and competing and so on, what would be or did you have a go-to technique? And if so, what would it be?
Oh, I know exactly.
Several.
I know exactly, and I know who I stole it from. Yeah, I can tell you. I started with the right. We call it a twist kick, maigari, straight kick in the rear leg, with the josote, ball of the foot. I started that when I was orange belt, and they stole that from Brian Matani. I know him very well. At the time, is that he had the most beautiful twist kick I've ever seen from that point. Now it was just work of art. And then I watched him and I watched him and I watched him, and I go home and I'd practice and practice and practice. And then I said to myself, it's not mine until I can beat him with his own technique. And then that happened, and then that was right leg. Then I had to go left leg because people would switch on me. So then after they did, I had both straight techniques. People would slip to the side and try and get the angle. So that's when the moishigari came in. So I started moishigari right side. Then I went to this tournament in New Jersey, and I was defending champion. And I knew they were scouting me. So they were going to be watching for the right roundhouse. So in the match, it was the final in the match, I showed the right roundhouse quite a bit on the elimination on the way up, but I'd been practicing the left. When the right time, the Zen moment came, that was it, and that was the left. So when I was sort of the kicking techniques, with the twist kick, I had the right twist punch. So the right twist punch because they close the distance on me, I'd use an eritsuki, the backhand. And then I started working on the front punch. Because after my visits to Roka Sensei's tournaments, I started to understand about control to Jodan. How to control a punch to the face, because it's very hard when you're used to hitting full bore and then trying to control the face. Well, I worked on that so that I didn't get disqualified for clipping somebody. So then I evolved, and those were my I know the evolution and the people I took it from. So I guess that's what a competitor does. You scout people, you steal techniques, and then you make them your own, and you're good to go.
Yeah.
I have to tell you though, roundhouse kicks, after the age of a certain age, they don't rise as far. Although my specialty was never Jodan because of the kick to the groin, but they diminish. But the rest, self-defense techniques. I was told one time by a very senior student that your roundhouse, your sidekick will go. Your roundhouse will go. He said, straight kick, you can do that for a very, very, very long time. So, so that's important. That's important. I keep that in my guided discovery toolbox.
Yeah, it's a footnote, I'm sure, on the journey there. In your own philosophy or your own experience, how would you characterize the importance of tradition in training? So where I'm going with this is, as a Westerner, you're studying, you're practicing Japanese arts. Is it important to maintain the rituals, the traditions that are typically associated with Japanese arts? The senpai kohai relationship, the bowing, the using the terminology, that kind of stuff, or is that not really important at all?
Well, we call ourselves a traditional style. So absolutely, all our Kihon is still in Japanese terminology. Fencing terminology is in French. So Japan, that's the terminology. So we use it. Terminology, bowing form, absolutely. Respect. I think all of that. Our form, as I said before, with jutsu, is very violent. It's a very violent energy. Yeah. So you have to temper that with respect and courtesy. So respect and courtesy is you go and you face an opponent, you don't underestimate your opponent, and you don't disrespect your opponent. I always respected my opponents, because to step into a ring or a shiai and face another person in combat takes courage. And I don't care if they lose 50-1. It takes courage to do that. So to me, that's all part of the tradition, and part of the teaching tool to bring that forward, to emphasize that. So I understand the other perspectives as well. It's fighting is fighting, but it's combat. Lots of different. Every culture had some form of fighting to defend itself. So I get that. This is, the karate is Japanese. It comes from Japan, and I think it's important that in our style anyway, in our form, we'll always keep it. I think again, that balance between the tiger and the lamb. you have to have that balance. I expect my students to be gentlemen, but on the other side of it, I expect them to be fierce. If they have to defend themselves, their family, or another individual, they have to be fierce. There's no hesitation. It's done. And so I think the traditional side, from my perspective, we're going to keep that as long as we can.
Mm-hmm. So you want them to be, is it warriors in the garden as opposed to gardeners in a war, right?
Yeah, I want them to be, gentlemen warrior, an officer and a gentleman. I want them to be that, coming back to being generals. I want them to be, they need to be etiquette, dignity, respect. I learned so much from my sensei about that and how to conduct yourself, and that I could go places after my experience with him, and the places he took me to. I was his demonstration partner, on a number of occasions, and he taught me well on how to carry myself and how to conduct myself and how to, and not just in my limited milieu. He was used to traveling with ambassadors and high-level people, and I wasn't. So I think that really adds to it. I'd like people to be, let's put it this way. I want them to be gentlemen. I also want them to, if they win the trophy and they're on the metro coming home and somebody wants to give them a hard time, and I ask them this question sometimes: what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Well, you're going to defend yourself. And if you have to beat them over the head with the trophy, defend yourself. That's what's going to happen. So that sort of edge, I think you need that that you call it, kokoro, guts. You got to have that edge, but at the same time, you don't open up that that box unless you absolutely have to. But once it's there, too many times I heard a martial artist defense situation, because they've been told so often, be careful, dangerous. You could hurt them. That they're a step off the mark when it comes to rock and roll, and then they get caught. Yeah. Then they get caught, they get knocked down, they get embarrassed, they lose confidence, they lose their self-esteem, and then say, what good is my martial arts because I got beat up. And so that's sort of the balance. I try to guide people in that direction. And plus, personalities some people are timid, and some people are ferocious. That's just they're born with this chi. So how do you temper that and guide them so that they're so they have a balance? They have a balance in life.
If you could, looking back over your martial arts career, if you could do it all over again, is there anything that you would maybe do differently than you did? And the follow-up to that is, what do you know now that you wish you had known sooner through your martial arts career? If anything.
I don't know if I would change anything. It goes back to my destiny again. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I feel like I've been guided along the way, guided discovery. I feel I've been guided as well. So I don't feel I would change anything. I probably, I guess if I would change something, I would have I would have inquired maybe earlier on the proper training techniques. Proper training techniques to protect the body and save the body from abuse. I teach it to my students now because a lot of my contemporaries, the majority of them are retired. A lot of my contemporaries are, hip replacements, knee replacements. It goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
And I attribute that, some of it, to incorrect training methods. I had a few knee surgeries, and I never liked these walking squats. We used to call them duck walk. You crouch down and found them very, very uncomfortable. And we did lots of them, and only to find later that that's not the best thing if you want to protect your knees. But if I would have learned a little bit about that, as I said earlier, our techniques to go maximum to the body or the makiwara or the bag. But if you go 100% in the air with no resistance, you're going to have knee trouble, you're going to have back trouble, hip trouble, all of those things. Now I've learned that through going to school and kinesiology and all of the things that are coming with that. Now I can tell my students, write them again and say, this is how you do this. This is how you do that. If you want to protect yourself. We didn't have any of that at the time, and kind of learned it, through trial and error, and maybe we're a little bit hard-headed as well at that time, but it breaks the body down, and I think it's broken down needlessly. I was lucky enough that I'm still pretty good. I can still do things, but I want to be the best. You want to be the best if your body allows you to be the best. So that, I guess, that would be my answer if I look back. But basically, I'm pretty satisfied the way it went. Sometimes I want to make a left-hand turn, and in my life, I make that decision, and to be stopped for whatever reason, and then relax and go to the left and think to myself, why didn't I make this decision like 2 years ago? And then it sort of falls into place. So I'm pretty happy with the way things are working out so far.
So what advice would you have for anyone who's looking to start karate or another martial art, either for themselves or as an activity for their children or friends or family or whatever? So if somebody's looking for a place to learn something, what would you recommend they look for?
First and foremost, sensei. It's not the style. It's the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I know my definition of a sensei. It's sensei who deals with the holistic approach, and you do the research, talk to people, do the research, and find out. Maybe by watching your show, they'd be able to find out some information that would help them. But if a parent wants to send their child to a competitive network, wrong with that. There's hockey parents and soccer parents, and why not, karate or judo parents? Why not? There's a place for that. I think that's fine.
Yeah.
And when I was teaching children, that parents wanted an activity. They wanted the discipline. They wanted the child to have all of those intangible things. Others are interested in their children going to the Olympics. But I would say the sensei is the most important. aspect. It doesn't matter what activity, it is, or what style, or what, form, whether it's wushu or karate or taekwondo. Well, I'm living proof of that, and some of your guests have said the same thing. They wouldn't be who they are or where they are without their sensei. So I only wish that upon, other people coming through the door, that do their homework. If you do your homework and you do your research, this is your child. This is your most valuable asset that you have. So do the research, find out as much as you can about the person, the sensei, the individual, and speak to them, interview them, find out what what their philosophy is. And if it suits, then go for it. Then go for it. I think that would be good.
Yeah. So any red flags that you would look for as well? Like recommend people watch out for this, watch out for that?
Well, if it's a child, aside from, whether they're safe, I think that if you have a sensei that maybe command style, you might think about that a little bit. For children, sometimes it works, but sometimes it doesn't work. I think the best teachers I learned from the judo teachers at Seidokwan dojos, judo and karate. I used to go early, so on Saturdays, so I could watch the children's judo class. I'd watch the judo senseis. They're all elderly. They're like grandfather, types. How they interacted with children, and how they cared about the children, and how they worked with them, and it was playful. It was a fun place to be, and I think that's the best bet. Now for adults, it's a whole different story. It depends. I mean, there's not like when I started, when there was limited choices. Now there's it's like a buffet of activities. Whatever you would like, whatever suits your fancy type of thing, you can go into. But you have to do your homework again. You have to study. You have to find out a little bit about the style, a little bit about the dojo, a little bit about the sensei. You have to sit in on a few classes to get the gist of it, and then talk to the sensei, and then go from there. Some people, their scope is limited. They just want to learn, a couple of techniques so they can go and impress somebody. Other people are captured by the myth of what Asian martial arts is, and they want to eat up all of the Eastern culture and that side of it. There's a place for that too. I think it's it's buyer beware. I think anything. Yes, it's a much different world in martial arts now than what it was in my time when we started. In the 60s and the 70s, it was a new thing, and limited to karate, a little bit, judo, a little bit of karate, and barely in the 60s taekwondo was starting to come in as well. But now, you name it, you got it. Great.
Yeah, lots of choice these days. But yeah, I like what you said, buyer beware.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. Is there anything that you wanted to add that we haven't covered, like where people can find you or your organization or your dojo? Or
Well, I would like to mention just one thing is that I'm part of a committee. I'm looking back a lot, but I'd rather look forward. we're formed a committee of senior Shorinji-ryu practitioners in various countries. I'm representing Canada. Michel Laurent is United States. Hiroshi Hisataka, the grandchild of the founder, is in Japan. And Olaf and Sandra Leone are in Germany. So we are forming the first international Shorinji-ryu, the WASC, World Alliance of Shorinji-ryu Karatedo. And we're attempting to bring all the various Shorinji-ryu under our line, under Kaiso Hisataka's line together. And we've been having numerous meetings, and we're hoping by the end of the year to start opening up to Shorinji-ryu black across the world who would like to join, because there's no international body for Shorinji-ryu. This way we can bring people together. So I'm excited about that. I think what we discussed in my philosophy and the traditional ways, because we want to carry on the teachings of Kaiso Hisataka and pass it on to other generations. And although other Shorinji-ryu are evolving, including Kentokukan, we want to stay true to the traditions of Ori, and we're bringing people together for that. This will be ranked black belts that, if they wish, join, and it'll be a platform to share information. There will be an element people could compete. I'm more interested in the let's say the intellectual side of it, the philosophical side of it, the teaching, the seminars, the clinics, the historical research that we hope to bring together on to the next, the next generation of people. It's time to bring everybody. Everybody has moved away from the center. Now it's time to bring people back into the center. So that's my my work for the future, and hopefully in the next, I'd say, few months, when the COVID passes, we'll be able to start to move forward on that. And if people want to reach me, they can go to Kentokukan website and contact us, through that. I'm at Dawson College right now, as the Hombu is still active, but with COVID, of course, everybody is closed down. So, and another resource would be the famous Darren Hunter, because he's my research man. He's the guy that does all. He's terribly interested in all things, all martial arts. I rely on him. You mentioned well, he pointed me to you, and any YouTube stuff that's out there, books, any research. He's my lead man on that. So he's doing the guided discovery for me. So.
Okay. Yeah. Well, again, appreciation to Sensei Hunter for connecting us. I genuinely really enjoyed our discussion today. I've taken some things to heart, some things that I've little epiphanies for me, I guess, that I've pulled from what you shared through your experiences and everything. So really appreciate that. And one of the things that you said, I thought it really resonated with the intention behind why I'm doing this to begin with is I wanted to discover the why and the how we got to where we are right now. You're talking about, destiny and been guided through your path in life and so on. And to me, and that's fascinating to hear you talk about that. But at the same time, I think it encapsulates discovering the why and the how sort of encapsulates the whole idea behind this, Karate Canucks conversation series that I'm doing, because there's a lot of wisdom out there, and I'm really glad for people like yourself and the other guests that I've had, and the ones that I will hopefully have in the future. The generosity in sharing their wisdom and their thoughts, and so that's very, very much appreciated. So again, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure.